My name is Princess Salma Al Said, and I was 24 years old on the night I decided my life would end. I remember the date clearly, October 12th, 2019, because every breath I took that evening felt like a countdown, like the slow tightening of a rope around my soul. I was living in 5 different palaces at the time, not because I was admired or cherished, but because I was being shared, rotated, circulated like property between 5 powerful Saudi princes who all called themselves my husbands. People who looked at my life from the outside saw gold, silk, marble, and titles, but I saw only walls. I saw a prison with 5 doors, each leading to a different kind of captivity. That night, as the desert wind whispered against the tinted windows of Prince Zayed's palace, I sat alone in the guest chamber assigned to me for the week. The room was breathtaking in the way museums are breathtaking, untouched, silent, cold. Golden filigree twisted across the ceiling like vines of fire. The silk drapes shimmered in soft cream tones. The chandelier above me sparkled with diamonds. But nothing in that room looked alive. Nothing in it felt like it belonged to me. Even the air seemed borrowed. I remember staring at my own reflection in the mirror, my face adorned with jewelry I never asked for, my eyes empty in a way that frightened even me. It was strange. The sense of being both everywhere and nowhere at once. I was a wife to 5 men, but not loved by any of them. I was a princess by blood, but owned by everyone but myself. I was surrounded by servants, guards, advisors, but I had never been more alone. Have you ever felt like the whole world could see you, yet no one truly saw you? That was my existence. The weight on my chest felt unbearable that evening, like someone pressing a stone into my ribs again and again. My heart didn't beat with fear anymore, it beat with resignation. My hands trembled as I sat at the edge of the silk-covered bed, rehearsing the steps that would bring my suffering to an end. I wasn't thinking about heaven or hell. I wasn't thinking about honor or disgrace. I was thinking of silence, blessed silence, after years of performing roles I didn't choose, living days that didn't feel like mine. But what I thought would be the final page of my story became the opening line of a miracle I never imagined possible. Because before I carried out my plan, something happened, something no logic, no tradition, no earthly power could ever explain. The moment I reached for the means to end my life, the air around me changed. The atmosphere thickened, as though the room itself took a breath. A presence, gentle yet overwhelming, entered the space. And in that moment, every part of me that had grown numb suddenly awakened. I didn't know it yet, but Jesus Christ was stepping into my story. I grew up in a palace that tourists would have photographed 1,000 times if they had ever been allowed inside. The Al Said estate was a monument of marble and wealth, a place where chandeliers dripped like frozen waterfalls from ceilings hand-painted by European artists flown in on private jets. My earliest memories were of polished floors so reflective I could see my face in them, hallways where the echoes of my footsteps were swallowed by silence, and gardens so meticulously maintained that not a single leaf dared fall out of place. People often imagine that such beauty must guarantee happiness. But have you ever lived in a place so perfect it feels unreal, so beautiful it becomes a cage? That was my childhood, a golden world, wrapped tightly around a lonely heart. My mother, Queen Liala, was the only gentle presence my heart ever trusted. She smelled like jasmine and warm milk. When she hugged me, I felt a kindness I couldn't find anywhere else in the palace. She used to sneak me little books, innocent children's stories, because she knew I loved reading more than jewelry or dresses. But those moments were stolen moments, carefully hidden from the eyes of my father. Prince Farouk Al Said believed affection weakened a woman. He believed daughters existed for strategy, not for love. I remember standing beside him during royal dinners, learning to smile perfectly, to speak only when spoken to sit straight, even when my back ached. He would glance at me the way an investor examines a piece of land, calculating, measuring what I could bring to his future. "Salma," he would say, "a daughter is a vessel of opportunity. You must always remember that." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. I only knew that whenever he looked at me, I felt less like a child and more like a plan. As I grew older, the restrictions tightened. I wasn't allowed to attend school with other children. Tutors streamed in and out of the palace daily, teaching me languages, economics, literature, religion. My education was elite, but it wasn't mine. Every lesson was designed to make me an asset, an appealing bride, a refined ornament, a bargaining chip for political alliances. I dreamed of going to a real classroom, of having friends, of laughing without measuring every breath. But dreams were luxuries in my world, and luxuries were permitted only to men. When I was 16, the fragile thread holding my heart together snapped. My mother fell ill suddenly, inexplicably, and the palace doctors whispered more than they explained. I sat by her bedside during her final night, gripping her hand like a child afraid of the dark. Her breathing was weak, her skin cold, but her eyes, oh, her eyes were warm. Even then, she brushed her thumb against my cheek and whispered, "Salma, forgive me. I cannot protect you from what is coming." Those were her last words to me. I didn't understand them until years later, but they lingered, haunting the edges of my mind like a prophecy. After her death, the palace changed. It became quieter, harsher, colder. My father no longer tried to hide his expectations. Without my mother's gentle presence shielding me, he began shaping my fate openly. He held meetings about me, arrangements, negotiations, strategies, as though I were a parcel to be shipped to the highest bidder. Servants avoided meeting my eyes, perhaps fearing they might see my desperation. My sisters retreated into their own worlds of fear and submission. And I, the third daughter, learned to disappear emotionally while still performing perfectly. But even in captivity, a small ember of longing burned inside me. I spent hours wandering our enormous library, running my fingers along the spines of books detailing lands I would never see. Italy, Japan, America, oceans, festivals, cities, bursting with life and color worlds, where women laughed freely in the streets, where they studied, worked, chose love for themselves. I devoured those books like a starving child. They became windows into a universe where freedom wasn't a crime. Sometimes I would climb onto the balcony outside my room and look at the sky, tracing the shape of clouds like a secret language. The sun setting over the desert painted the horizon in colors so fierce and beautiful they made my heart ache. I used to imagine that somewhere beyond that horizon, my real life was waiting for me, a life where I could choose my own steps, breathe my own breath, speak without fear. Have you ever felt a longing so deep it hurts physically, a hunger for something you've never touched but somehow know exists? That longing kept me alive through the years of silence. When I turned 19, the day that had lurked like a shadow finally arrived. I was summoned to my father's private chamber, a place I entered only when my presence served a purpose. I remember the smell of incense burning too strongly, the tall windows draped heavily in velvet, and the tension that sat thick in the air. My father didn't look at me when I walked in. He was reading documents, contracts, I later realized with signatures from 5 of the most influential men in the kingdom. He lifted his eyes and said, in a voice devoid of emotion, "Salma, the time has come. You will unite 5 great houses. You will marry the princes who have signed this agreement." He spoke as though announcing the weather. Rain tomorrow, shared wife today, no difference. The room spun. I felt my knees weaken, my throat tighten. 5 husbands, 5 households, 5 claimants over my life, my body, my future. I wasn't being married. I was being divided. I tried to speak, to beg, to plead, to scream, but no sound left my mouth. My father continued talking, describing political advantages, financial benefits, religious blessings. Each word was a nail sealing the coffin of my youth. That night I stood in my room, staring at the city lights through the palace window, feeling something inside me fracture. I was no longer a daughter, no longer myself. I was a contract, and the world I had longed for slipped further beyond reach. The wedding came sooner than I expected, a grand spectacle orchestrated not for love but for politics. I remember standing in the ornate bridal chamber, surrounded by maids who pinned jewels into my hair with trembling fingers. The dress I wore was worth more than a middle-class home, layers of embroidered silk, pearls sewn into every seam, diamonds glittering along the veil, but I felt like I was being wrapped for burial, not celebration. My chest felt tight beneath the golden fabric, my breathing shallow, my hands cold. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see a bride. I saw a transaction. The ceremony itself was overwhelming. Hundreds of guests, political elites, military commanders, oil magnates, and religious leaders filling a hall so bright it almost hurt to look at. My 5 husbands stood in a semicircle, each waiting for his turn to take my hand, each silently claiming a slice of authority over my life. Prince Karim the soldier gripped my hand with the strength of a man accustomed to command. Prince Zayed the oil tycoon studied me with eyes that evaluated beauty like currency. Prince Imran the religious figure kept his gaze lowered, murmuring prayers under his breath as though binding me spiritually. Prince Rashid the banker signed documents during the reception, pausing only to offer me a polite smile. Prince Tarek the businessman watched me with a mixture of possession and scrutiny, as though assessing my future usefulness. At one point during the ceremony, I felt the room tilt slightly, as if I were floating above my own body. People clapped, cameras flashed, musicians played, and yet, inside me, something was dying quietly. Have you ever watched your own life slipping away while everyone around you celebrates? That was my wedding day. The nightmare deepened after the celebrations ended. The contract was put into effect immediately, dividing my life into a weekly rotation, Monday and Tuesday with Prince Karim, Wednesday and Thursday with Prince Zayed, Friday and Saturday with Prince Imran, Sunday with Prince Rashid, and an alternating extra rotation with Prince Tariq every other week. My belongings were packed and unpacked endlessly, shifting from palace to palace like a traveling exhibit. I didn't own time anymore. Time owned me. Prince Karim's palace was the first stop in my weekly cycle. The moment I arrived, his military discipline swallowed me whole. I was expected to rise at 5 a.m., regardless of how late I had gone to bed the night before. A maid would knock on my door and remind me of the schedule: exercise, breakfast, reading, training in etiquette, required religious studies, lunch, rest, evening engagement, dinner, silence. Karim rarely spoke to me unless he wanted to critique my posture, comment on my discipline, or remind me of my role. I once forgot to place my shoes exactly parallel to each other by the entryway, and he made me repeat the action 15 times. His palace felt like a barracks disguised in luxury. By midweek, when I was transferred to Prince Zayed's household, the environment shifted drastically. Zayed's world revolved around appearance. Mirrors lined the hallways, tall, silver-framed mirrors that reflected my face at every turn, forcing me to confront myself again and again. I had beauty technicians assigned to me, adjusting my makeup, styling my hair, choosing my outfits with the precision of artists preparing a canvas. Zayed often called me to his private lounge, only to sit me before one of the enormous mirrors and point out what he considered imperfections. Your eyeliner isn't even, your posture slouches, your dress clashes with the wall decor. I felt like a mannequin polished and displayed, not a human being. By Friday, I found myself in Prince Imran's domain, a palace governed by religious fervor. It was the quietest of all the palaces, but not in a peaceful way. Servants moved silently, music was banned, books unrelated to religious study were locked away. I was required to memorize passages for hours, sometimes until my eyes blurred. Joy was discouraged. Laughter was almost sinful. Women spoke softly, their voices barely more than whispers. Imran often watched me as I prayed, correcting my posture, my pronunciation, my devotion. I felt as though God Himself was being used as a weapon to control me. The more I struggled, the more isolated I became. Sundays with Prince Rashid were cold in a different way. He treated our arrangement like a business contract with weekly performance evaluations. We sat in his office, where he reviewed spreadsheets and portfolios while casually asking about my attitude, my compliance, my behavior during the week. He seldom touched me. He seldom smiled. He seldom acknowledged me as a woman. With Rashid, I felt like an employee fulfilling a quota, but it was Prince Tarek who frightened me the most. His palace was unpredictable, a place where luxury met volatility. One moment he was charming, laughing loudly, showering me with extravagant gifts. The next, he was exploding in rage over something trivial. I learned to read his moods like weather patterns, anticipating thunderstorms before they struck. He never hit me, but he threw objects, slammed doors, yelled until his voice cracked. The servants walked on eggshells. I often slept with my heart pounding, praying the night would pass unbroken. My emotional state deteriorated rapidly under the rotation system. Every palace demanded a different version of me. With Karim, I was the disciplined wife. With Zaid, the beautiful ornament. With Imran, the devout servant. With Rashid, the polite investment. With Tariq, the emotional shield. But nowhere was I simply Salma. Weeks bled into months, months into years. I stopped recognizing myself. My reflection began to look like a stranger. My smile became mechanical, my steps robotic. Inside, something hollowed out. The pressure intensified until even my body rebelled. I lost weight, unable to eat from the constant anxiety. My hair thinned, my sleep shattered into fragments. Headaches drilled into my skull like punishment. Palace doctors prescribed vitamins, sleep aids, herbs, but none of it reached the real wound. My spirit was cracking. Desperation drove me to attempt escape twice. The first attempt happened during Hajj in Mecca. I thought the crowds might shield me. I slipped away during the circulation around the Kaaba, heart pounding, eyes scanning for guards. For a moment, I felt the thrill of possibility, freedom, brushing the edge of my fingertips, but I was caught before I reached the airport. Dragged back, locked in a room, no windows, no books, barely enough food, 3 months in isolation, as if being erased. But the second attempt broke me. I had contacted my cousin in America through encrypted messages. She had promised help money, documents, a safe route. I believed her. I trusted her. I thought blood would protect me. But a servant, a woman I had confided in since childhood, betrayed me, handing my messages directly to my father. Betrayal tastes bitter. But when it comes from someone you love, it becomes poison. I began to wonder if anyone in my life truly cared whether I lived or died. Have you ever felt trapped in a life so suffocating you start to forget what freedom feels like? That was my world. A golden prison wrapped in silk, guarded by tradition, culture, fear, and power. Years passed, and the walls closed tighter. My heart dimmed, my hope flickered, and eventually, I stopped imagining escape altogether, until Jesus stepped in. By the time I turned 24, the collapse inside me was no longer invisible. My body began speaking the pain my lips could never voice. I woke each morning feeling as though someone had carved out the center of my chest and filled it with sand. Heavy, shifting, suffocating. My hands trembled constantly. My heart raced even when I slept. I felt dizzy walking down the long palace corridors, as though the floor tilted beneath my feet. I tried to hide it, out of fear that weakness would only invite more control. But even the maids noticed. "Princess, you look pale," they whispered. Pale didn't begin to describe what I was becoming. I was fading. Doctors visited me often, their faces polite but confused. They checked my blood, my hormones, my heart, offered supplements and strict diets, suggested meditation and sleep aids, but no test could detect what was actually killing me. The slow erosion of a soul trapped in despair. Have you ever felt your mind begin to fray at the edges, as though the weight you carry is pushing you beyond what a human heart was meant to endure? Then came the moment that shattered what remained of my strength. I discovered I was pregnant. I remember the exact moment the doctor told me. My breath froze. The world blurred. The room felt too small to contain the storm rising inside me. Pregnant. With whose child? Kareem's? Zaid's? Imran's? Rashid's? Tariq's? The truth was horrifying. I didn't know. How could any woman bear a child conceived in a life where her body wasn't hers, where intimacy wasn't love but obligation? Shame crawled over my skin until I felt like I was drowning in it. My mind spiraled. What kind of life would this child inherit? Would they become another bargaining chip? Another prisoner? Another soul raised in a system that suffocated every breath of freedom? I stared at myself in the mirror that evening, hands pressed to my stomach, feeling an ache so deep it blotted out the world. Tears spilled silently. My reflection looked like a ghost's eyes rimmed with red, mouth trembling, shoulders collapsing inward. I whispered, "I can't do this. I can't bring a child into this." A sharp, dark thought whispered back, "End it. End everything. End the pain before it grows." And for the first time in my life, I considered death not as an act of rebellion, but as the only door left open. In the days that followed, I drifted like a shadow. The palaces felt colder, the halls darker, conversations muffled. Servants looked at me, then looked away. I felt myself withdrawing, shrinking, folding inward. I stopped eating, stopped speaking, stopped resisting. Something inside me gave up. By the night of October 12th, 2019, my mind was set. The palace of Prince Zaid glowed with warm light as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, but inside my room everything felt dim. The gold-plated lamps, the silk sheets, the carved wooden furniture, none of it touched me. I sat on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest, trembling as the finality of my decision settled like ice in my bones. The plan was simple, precise, quiet. No one would find me until morning, and by then, the suffering would be over. I took out a small notebook, the only place I ever dared to write my truth. My handwriting shook as I scribbled what I believed would be my final words. Apologies, confessions, prayers to a God I wasn't sure could hear me. I asked Allah to forgive the sin I was about to commit, though even as I wrote His name, I felt nothing. No comfort, no closeness, only emptiness, like calling out into a desert with no echo. My heart ached with longing for a God who felt near, a God who cared, a God who saw me. I placed the notebook beside the bed, stood up on unsteady legs, and walked toward the table where everything was prepared. My body felt disconnected, as though I were watching myself from a distance. My mind hummed with a strange stillness. This is it, I thought. This is the only way. But just as my fingers touched what I needed to end my life, something happened. The air shifted not like a breeze, but like the room itself inhaled. The atmosphere thickened, warm and electric, wrapping around me like invisible arms. I froze. My breath caught. For a moment, I wondered if my mind was finally breaking. But then the light appeared, a soft glow at first, like dawn touching the horizon, then brighter, fuller, radiant. It filled the entire room, saturating every corner with a brilliance that didn't hurt my eyes. My heart pounded not with fear, but with awe, as though some deep part of me recognized this presence long before my mind understood. I dropped to my knees without thinking. Tears streamed down my face. My lips trembled. Something or someone was here. Someone who saw me in my darkest moment. Someone who refused to let me die. I didn't know it then, but Jesus Christ was stepping into my breaking point not to condemn me, but to rescue me. As the light slowly softened around me, I found myself trembling not from terror, but from a strange, overwhelming awareness that something holy had entered my room. It was as though the air itself had shifted into a different kind of substance, thicker and gentler at the same time, full of warmth that seeped into my bones. I didn't understand it. I didn't have language for it. But somewhere deep inside, my spirit whispered, "Don't move. Something is happening." The light faded just enough for the familiar shapes of the room to return: the silk curtains, the polished marble floor, the mirrored wardrobe, but the atmosphere no longer felt the same. It was as though the world had tilted, revealing a layer of reality I had never accessed before. And when the light settled completely, I realized something strange. I was still alive. I was still here. My plan, my despair, my carefully orchestrated final moment, none of it had happened. Instead, all I felt was silence. A deep, sacred silence, like the world was holding its breath. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against the floor to steady myself. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a kind of anticipation, as though I were waiting for something, someone who had just stepped into the edges of my awareness. In desperation, I fumbled for my phone. I didn't know why. Maybe I needed a distraction. Maybe I needed noise. Maybe I just wanted confirmation that I hadn't completely lost my mind. I unlocked the screen and opened the music app, hoping to drown out the strange electricity humming through the room. But as I scrolled through playlists, something nudged me gently, almost like a whisper inside my mind. Radio. I hesitated. Why? I never listened to the radio, but my finger moved almost involuntarily, tapping the icon that led to the tuner. Static filled the room, a low crackling noise that made my nerves jump. I twisted through frequencies, each station dissolving into more static. Then suddenly, through the static, a faint melody drifted in a soft, unfamiliar voice, singing in Arabic. Yesu yuhibuk, Yesu yuhibuk. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. I froze. The voice was gentle, full of longing, full of tenderness I had never heard in religious songs before. My breath caught in my throat. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. I turned the volume up. The signal strengthened, still fuzzy but audible enough for the words to pierce straight into the center of me. Jesus loves you. It didn't make sense. I had never studied Christianity. I had no exposure to churches, sermons, or teachings. I didn't even know Jesus was referred to in such intimate, emotional language. In my world, God was distant, majestic, unapproachable. God was law, judgment, obligation, but this voice, this song spoke of a God who loved, a God who came close, a God who called out to the broken. I pressed the phone against my ear, desperate not to lose the signal. A man began speaking through the static, an Arabic dialect that sounded Lebanese or Egyptian. "If you are listening tonight," he said, "know this. Jesus sees your pain. He knows your suffering. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned." The words struck me like a blow to the chest. How could he possibly know? He continued, "Many who grew up in strict religion feel unseen, unheard, unloved. But Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I felt my throat tighten, my eyes stung with tears. No one had ever spoken to the deepest part of me like that. As the program continued, people called in to share their testimonies. Former Muslims, women who had lived under control and fear, men who felt crushed by expectation, people who described emptiness that sounded exactly like mine, years of praying, fasting, memorizing, yet never feeling known by God. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. These strangers were describing my heart. One woman said through tears, "I followed rules all my life, but I never felt loved. I thought I had to earn God's approval. But when I encountered Jesus, I felt seen for the first time." Another man whispered, "Islam gave me commands. Jesus gave me peace." I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know if any of this could be real, but something inside me cracked open. Something I had buried under years of silence and obedience and fear. I whispered into the quiet room, "Jesus, who are you?" I waited. Nothing happened. Only the faint static from the radio, the soft hum of the air conditioner. But I felt something shift inside me. A warmth, a flicker of hope, a small, trembling curiosity that felt dangerous and yet strangely right. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the first seed of the gospel was planted in my heart, a seed that would soon bloom into a miracle that would shatter every chain around my life. The radio continued whispering testimonies through the static, but something in the room shifted again so subtly. At first, I thought it was my imagination. A warmth pressed gently against my back, like sunlight filtering through a window. Though it was long past midnight, my breath froze in my chest. The air thickened, humming with a presence I could feel but not see. My heart beat so loudly that I could hear it echoing inside my ears. I turned slowly, afraid that if I moved too quickly, the moment would shatter. And then I saw it. A glow soft and white gathering in the corner of the room, expanding outward like a veil of light being lifted. It wasn't harsh or blinding, it wasn't cold, it was alive. The light moved, breathed, pulsed with a gentle radiance that made the hairs on my arms rise. I felt heat rush through my body, spreading from my chest outward until my fingers tingled. Something inside me whispered, "You are not alone." The glow intensified until the edges of it began to take shape. Shoulders first, then a head, then the outline of a man standing in the middle of my room. I should have screamed. I should have run. But instead, I fell to my knees as though some invisible force had lowered me softly, gently, tenderly. Tears spilled down my cheeks without permission. My whole body trembled, and then the figure stepped forward. He looked like a man, yet not like any man I had ever seen. His presence carried weight, real, holy, overwhelming, and yet I felt more peace in that moment than I had felt in my entire life. His eyes were the first thing I truly saw, deep, warm, filled with a love so pure and so unearthly that every wound inside me seemed to rise to the surface. His hair fell gently around his shoulders, illuminated by the light that flowed from him rather than onto him. His robe shimmered like woven light, but what drew my gaze and held it were his hands, more specifically, the marks on them, faint yet unmistakable, wounds, healed yet visible, glowing softly as though lit from within. When he spoke, I felt the sound more than heard it. His voice resonated through me, through my bones, through my soul, through every broken place I had tried so hard to hide. "Selma." He said my name the way no one ever had, soft, deliberate, full of affection. I gasped. The sound of it stirred something ancient inside me, something that recognized him even though my mind did not. He stepped closer, and I felt the air wrap around me like a warm embrace. "Habibti," my beloved daughter. His Arabic was perfect, fluent, intimate, familiar. I have been with you every moment of your suffering. Every tear you shed, I saw. Every night you cried yourself to sleep. I was near you. You were never alone. My hands covered my face as sobs shook through me. No one, not my father, not my husbands, not a single person in that world had ever spoken to me like that. Why? I whispered. It was all I could manage. Why would you come to me? He knelt in front of me, lowering himself until his eyes met mine. Because you are mine. Because you were never created to be property. You were never meant to live in fear. You were never meant to be owned by men. You were made for freedom, and I have come to set you free. The room blurred as tears flowed uncontrollably down my cheeks. My hands shook so badly I pressed them to the floor to steady myself. I felt like every chain I had ever worn, emotional, spiritual, psychological, was breaking under the weight of his words. He reached out and gently placed his hand over my heart. The moment his palm touched me, a surge of warmth flooded my body, comforting, cleansing, overwhelming. I felt something heavy detach from my chest, like iron shackles dissolving into dust. This burden you carry, this shame, this despair, it is not from God. Come to me, Salma. I will give you rest. I shook my head, choking on the words. I don't deserve. Before I could finish, he whispered, I did not come for the worthy. I came for the wounded. His fingers lifted my chin, guiding my gaze toward his. Look at me. When I did, I saw love pure, unstoppable, unconditional. It was unlike anything I had ever known. It felt like being seen for the first time, like being recognized, like being home. I died for you, Selma. I carried your pain, I carried your shame, I carried every wound you bear. You are not forgotten, you are chosen, you are loved. My voice broke as the question I had buried for years escaped my lips. Jesus, can you save me? Can you take me out of this life? He smiled a smile so radiant it melted the fear inside me. Yes, beloved, I will rescue you, not just from this place, but from the prison inside your heart. Trust me, your freedom begins tonight. I collapsed into sobs, lifting my hands in surrender. Jesus, I give you everything, my life, my pain, my future, all of it. As soon as I spoke those words, I felt the weight I had carried for years lift completely like a physical release. Peace, real peace, flooded every corner of my being. And then, as gently as he had appeared, Jesus stood, his form brightening once more. You are not alone anymore, Salma. I am with you, always. The light expanded, filling the room, enveloping him, and then I knelt alone on the floor, breathless, trembling, undone. But I was not the same woman anymore. Jesus had entered my story, and nothing would ever be the same again. When I woke the next morning, the sunlight spilling through the silk curtains felt different, as if the light itself had changed its nature overnight. The same room surrounded me, yet everything looked unrecognizably new. The air felt fresher, warmer, almost alive, as though something holy still lingered in the corners. My chest felt light for the first time in years. The ache, the crushing sadness, the suffocating despair, all of it had lifted as though someone had reached inside me during the night and untied knots that had been choking me for years. I sat up slowly, half expecting the peace to vanish like a dream. A presence inside me that felt nothing like religion, rules, or obligation. It felt like love, like life, like the breath I never knew I'd been missing. I whispered his name, Jesus, and a wave of warmth spread across my chest again. I pressed a hand to my heart. I had no theology, no doctrine, no structure to explain what had happened, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Jesus was real, and he had come for me. Yet as the morning progressed, reality pressed close again. The rotation schedule, the security, the husbands, the pregnancy, the danger. Following Jesus inside a Saudi palace wasn't just difficult, it was potentially fatal. And yet, deep inside, I sensed his whisper, "Do not fear, I will lead you." That afternoon, curiosity tugged at me. I slipped my phone under my veil and pretended to listen to music, but instead I searched frequencies again, trying to find the mysterious Christian station from the night before. I didn't expect it to work, but suddenly the same soft static crackled through the speaker, followed by that same warm voice preaching the gospel in Arabic. The program topic that day startled me. Jesus rescues the oppressed. Jesus opens prison doors. Jesus leads his children out of bondage. My hands shook. My breath caught. It felt as though the message was aimed directly at my heart. I listened every chance I got. Late at night, early mornings, whenever I could hide my phone under blankets or pillows, testimonies poured through the static stories of Muslims who had encountered Jesus through dreams, visions, miraculous interventions. Women trapped in forced marriages, men escaping extremism, even people from royal families across the region. I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. Jesus was calling many of us. A week after my encounter, something extraordinary happened. I was staying at Prince Imran's palace. The atmosphere there was suffocatingly quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every heartbeat. During one of the long prayer sessions, he demanded, I caught sight of a woman kneeling behind me, one of the maids. She was Filipino, small-framed, with tired eyes but a gentle expression. I had seen her many times but never spoken to her. As she rose, the sleeve of her uniform lifted just enough for me to see a flash of silver beneath her collar, a tiny cross pendant hidden under her clothes. My heart skipped. A cross, here, in the most religiously strict of all 5 palaces. As soon as Prince Imran left for a meeting, I approached her quietly, my voice barely more than a breath. I need to talk to you, I whispered in English, trembling with fear and hope. About Jesus. She froze. Her eyes widened, her lips parted in shock. For a moment, I worried she might scream. Instead, she blinked rapidly, tears filling her eyes. Tonight, she whispered. After midnight, servant's washroom, come alone. Her name was Maria Dizon, and she would change my life forever. That night, hidden in the dimly lit washroom, Maria confessed that she had been a secret Christian for 15 years. She and a small group of Filipino and Indonesian workers gathered in laundry rooms, storage closets, and basements across various palaces to pray, read scripture, and help any convert who needed guidance. They were part of a quiet, invisible network of believers who risked their lives for the sake of the gospel. She told me she had been praying earnestly for years that God would allow her to minister to someone inside the royal family, but she never dreamed it would be one of the wives. When I told her my story, how Jesus appeared to me, how he spoke my name, how peace had filled my heart, Maria began to cry. She held my hands, trembling, whispering, "Sister." From that moment on, she began to disciple me in secret. Late at night, in empty laundry rooms, she taught me simple prayers. She wrote Bible verses on tiny pieces of paper and hid them inside my clothing. She explained the gospel slowly, gently, piece by piece. She taught me how to hear the Holy Spirit's voice, how to discern his guidance, how to walk in faith even when surrounded by danger. I devoured every word. I was like a starving woman finally tasting water. And Jesus was no longer a distant figure in a vision. He was alive inside me, leading me step by step. One night, Maria whispered something that made my breath catch. "Salma, Jesus wants to free you not just spiritually, but physically." She then revealed that the underground Christian network had helped several women escape abusive households in the past. Roots had been established, safe houses, contacts, drivers, even forged documents. It was dangerous, life-threatening, but possible. My heart pounded. But how? There's security everywhere. Cameras, guards, rotation schedules. Maria smiled gently. When Jesus opens a door, no man can shut it. Over the next 3 months, strange things began happening. Cameras malfunctioned, guards were suddenly reassigned, certain hallways were left unmonitored, doors that were always locked became inexplicably unlocked. I received dreams clear, vivid directions, showing guards blind spots, timing windows, escape routes. Jesus was orchestrating every detail. The final miracle came in December 2019. Maria's cousin, a Christian driver, arranged transportation disguised as a delivery truck. A Jordanian contact secured a temporary identity for me. A secret house awaited us near the border, a safe place run by believers. The plan hinged on one thing: slipping out of Prince Tarek's palace at the exact hour Jesus had shown me in a dream. December 14th, 2019. I wore a servant's uniform, my royal clothes hidden beneath a pile of laundry. Maria hugged me tightly, whispering prayers into my hair. My hands shook as I walked down the corridor, heart hammering. The palace felt unnervingly still. Too still. Every step felt like a lifetime. Then the miracles began. Every camera along the hallway I needed to pass had gone dark. Electrical glitch, the guards said later. The gatekeeper left his post because he received a sudden call from his sick mother. The outer gate, normally locked, had been left open for maintenance. Guards, usually stationed near the loading dock, had been called away for an emergency briefing. I walked straight through. No one saw me. No one stopped me. It felt as though angels themselves were clearing the way. I climbed into the back of the delivery truck, heart racing, tears streaming down my face. As the engine roared to life and the palace disappeared behind us, I whispered, "Jesus, you did this. You freed me." Hours later, after crossing the Jordanian border with documents that should never have worked but somehow did, the driver pulled over near a safe house hidden behind olive trees. When I stepped out of the truck and my feet touched free soil for the first time in my life, my knees buckled. I fell to the ground, sobbing into the dirt. For the first time in 24 years, I breathed freely. I was alive. I was safe. I was free. And it was Jesus, only Jesus, who had brought me out. When I arrived at the safe house in Jordan, the world felt strangely quiet. Quiet in a way that made my body shake. Maria's cousin led me into a small room with pale blue walls and a single window overlooking a cluster of olive trees. Nothing about the house was luxurious. There were no marble floors, no golden chandeliers, no velvet drapes. Instead, everything was simple, humble, and for the first time in my life, simplicity felt like heaven. The moment the door closed behind me, the weight of the years I had survived crashed down on me at once. I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands as wave after wave of emotion racked my body. Relief, grief, gratitude, trembling joy. It all spilled out of me in messy, uncontrollable sobs. I cried for the girl I used to be. I cried for the years stolen from me. I cried for the chains Jesus had shattered. And I cried because somehow, impossibly, I had survived. The believers in the safe house treated me not like a fugitive, not like royalty, not like a burden, but like family. They prayed with me. They sat with me. They listened to me. They fed me warm soup and tucked blankets around my shoulders when nightmares woke me in the middle of the night. And little by little, the hollow corners of my heart began to fill. My first Sunday in Jordan, they brought me to a small Arabic-speaking church hidden in the back room of a simple apartment building. There were no grand decorations, no ornate rituals, no powerful figures controlling the atmosphere, just ordinary people worshiping Jesus with a sincerity that pierced my soul. When the congregation began to sing Amazing Grace in Arabic, something inside me broke open. I wept openly, arms lifted, unable to contain the gratitude flooding through me. For the first time in my life, I worshipped freely, and I felt Jesus standing with me. But freedom didn't erase trauma. It didn't delete the years of fear. Healing became a journey, slow, painful, beautiful. Counselors helped me process the emotional scars that ran deep. Some days I felt strong, other days I felt fragile, triggered by small reminders of my past. But through every moment, I felt Jesus gently leading me like a shepherd, guiding a wounded sheep. I learned how to breathe again, how to rest, how to trust people not instantly, not perfectly, but slowly. Months passed, and I began helping in refugee support groups quietly at first, then more boldly. Women came to me with stories that echoed mine: forced marriages, religious pressure, domestic captivity. I listened to them with tears in my eyes, telling them, I know this pain. I've lived this pain. But Jesus can heal you. I'm proof of that. Many of them had never heard the gospel presented as love, as relationship, as freedom. And their hearts softened like mine once had. I didn't know it then, but God was shaping my calling. 2 years after my escape, during a volunteer event for displaced families, I met Elias, a Christian missionary serving in the region. He had gentle eyes, a steady voice, and a kindness that didn't seek anything in return. At first, I couldn't look him in the eyes without flinching. Years of being controlled had damaged my ability to trust men, but Elias never pushed, never demanded, never rushed. He treated me as an equal, as a human being, as a sister in Christ. He saw me, not my past, not my trauma, not my former title me. We spoke for months before I let myself consider that a future beyond fear could exist. One evening after a prayer gathering, he told me, Salma, you are the bravest woman I've ever met, and I want to walk beside you for whatever God calls you to do, whether that's friendship or something more. His sincerity disarmed me completely. When he proposed a year later, I cried not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Jesus had given me not only freedom, but restoration, love that honored me, love that reflected his heart. Our wedding was nothing like my first marriage. There were no crowds, no political contracts, no gold or spectacle, just a small group of believers gathered in a tiny church basement. We worshipped, we prayed, and as I spoke my vows, I felt Jesus smiling over my new beginning. Elias held my hands and whispered, You are cherished, Salma, not owned. I wept as those words washed over wounds I didn't know were still tender. Shortly after our marriage, our daughter was born, a little girl with bright eyes and a cry that filled the room with life. We named her Grace. Holding her in my arms, I understood something deeply. Jesus had rewritten my story from captivity to freedom, from despair to hope, from death to life. Grace would grow up knowing love, truth, and safety, things I never had. She would never be owned, never be silenced, never be divided. She would know Jesus from the moment she could speak his name. My story spread quietly at first, then through small groups, then through testimonies shared across churches and ministries. Women from across the Middle East began reaching out, asking for help, for prayer, for hope. God used my pain to unlock doors for others, and I realized that my rescue wasn't just for me. Jesus saved me so I could help save others. Today, I work with underground networks that rescue women trapped in violent marriages, religious oppression, and honor-based captivity. I speak at churches anonymously sometimes, openly other times. My past still makes me a target. My name is still whispered in royal circles with disdain. Some extremist groups have sworn vengeance. But you know what? I'm not afraid. When Jesus breaks your chains, fear loses its power. And now, to you, whoever you are, wherever you are listening from, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt trapped in a life you didn't choose? Have you ever felt unseen, unheard, unloved? Have you ever wondered if God truly cares about your pain? I used to ask those questions every day, and then Jesus stepped into my story. He sees you too. He knows your tears, He knows your wounds, He knows the burdens you've been carrying quietly, and He is whispering the same words to you that He whispered to me. You are mine. I have come to set you free. You are mine. No matter what chains hold you, fear, shame, addiction, trauma, sin, Jesus can break them. He did it for me. He can do it for you. If you need prayer, if you're searching for hope, if your heart feels heavy tonight, leave a comment below or send a message. You're not alone. Not anymore. And if this testimony touched you, please subscribe for more stories of what Jesus is doing around the world. Because this isn't just my story. This is the story of a God who rescues, a God who sees, a God who saves. And He is calling your name too.